I've been asked to talk about, um, the incoming administration's view when it comes to diaspora. And just before I go into the discourse, I also want to just briefly touch on my own personal experience with Pastor D. I'm based in France. I've been in France for almost 10 years now. It's going to be 10 years exactly by September 18 this year. I'm privileged to also be the National Youth Pastor for France, RCG. I'm also a pastor of a Redeemed branch in France, and I'm also the one in charge of development affairs for the continent. We have an annual camp we do every year, European Youth Camp, on the platform of the Young Adults and Youth Affairs. And every year, most often than not, we try to bring back Pastor D. This particular year, we beat more than we can chew. After a beautiful camp with maybe over 300 or 400 young people across Europe, we had debt waiting for us. And this camp would cost, tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of euros. So on this particular camp meeting, I think it was I'm not sure what country, maybe in Belgium, one of the countries we had it. So all the executives in Europe had to gather, and we had to call Pastor D and tell him, see, alas, the axe was borrowed, it has fallen. So we need help. And, without missing words, he was supposed to be a guest speaker. He is a guest speaker. But when you now ask your guest speaker, you're not giving an honorarium, you're asking your guest speaker to clear the debt of a camp meeting in Europe. And lo and behold, without missing words, I had to post this on my link, on my personal page when this happened, and Pastor D cleared our debts. We would never forget that. He did this unannounced. Till today, it's one memory would always never forget, because he's not somebody who just talks the talk, he walks the talk. And that's him putting his money where his mouth is. So when we talk about Pastor D's legacy in terms of youth development, accountability, I'm telling you, we experienced this firsthand. So you might have experienced it in Nigeria, but I'm saying, and that's one experience, right? I don't even know how much impact it's had across young people's lives as far as Asia. And I'm privileged to know that this platform is definitely a solid one to be able to mainstream his legacy. And I want to say thank you once again for all that you do and for upholding his legacy. Just my first slide, please. If you could put up my first slide. So while the technical team is coming up, when I got into France, I had a passion for Nigeria, and I still do. As a matter of fact, before I left Nigeria, I didn't jack bar like many people. That's why I'm here. So I had always done things in Nigeria when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation. I had engagement with Microsoft over 10 years ago. I had engagement with the likes of the Commonwealth. And then beyond all of those engagements, also did projects even as far as Brazil, representing Nigeria young people as far as 2012. And then I went for my NYC, shortly after my first degree, 1 year after actually. And then after my NYC, one of the reasons why I didn't redeploy, immediately after my degree, didn't redeploy was because I wanted to still feel the pulse of the country. So I went as far as Adamawa State, Yola. And even though I never, even though I had the chance to have redeployed, I wanted to feel the pulse of the northern people, just to understand, so I can have an holistic idea of what Nigeria and what the nation was about. Shortly after that, continuing my project, when I got to France, one of the reasons why France was a destination for me was because I wanted a country where I wouldn't have to do more than 6 hours flight back and forth, and also be able to be, mainstream, Nigerian conversation, and be able to be the bridge, with all due respect, to be the bridge. And back there, as I did some of the things which I will share about with us, I also got married recently, almost 2 years now, and one of the questions I asked my fiancée then, married to a beautiful wife, she's probably watching right now from Europe, and one of the things I asked her was, it was an interview. You're born again, spirit-filled. Do you love Nigeria? Or you're also part of we are here forever? And that answer about being passionate about Nigeria was going to define whether I continued or not. And this has been the dream I've cried for years. But all of the things I did long before I left Nigeria, to the time where I was now based out of Nigeria, I want to say with all sense of modesty that I've been more useful to Nigeria as somebody in diaspora. And that takes me to the first slide that I want to talk about, that Nigerian talents or Nigerian diaspora doesn't have to be a lost treasure. They're actually trapped assets out of the country. I've come to Nigeria regularly, sometimes 3-4 times a year, done projects with the Lagos state government, everything that revolves around facilitating investment for the country. And so, for me, one of the conversations that we should begin to have is not really the story of a lost case story that Nigerians are living. It's about how we can harness the skills. So here I wrote that diasporas are not treasures lost, they are great assets willing to be explored. Next slide, please. Just globally, if you look at the diaspora globally, if diaspora was a country, the diaspora would be the 5th largest in the world. So that means if you take China, India, Indonesia, the US, the diaspora as a whole would be the 5th largest. To say it's not news anymore that people have to live for different reasons. Even Jesus Christ had to live at the time. 2017 to 2012, according to the UN statistics, Nigerian migrants abroad, or according to the UN statistics, this particular one says we're about 1.2 million official figures. So this 1.2 million doesn't take into account other things. If you go to Western Union will be telling you about 5 million Nigerians abroad. If you go to NIDCOM will tell you between 5 to 10. So depending on the stats, roughly you actually have to synthesize all of the statistics, and in reality, not theory right now, there are about 15 to 20 million Nigerians abroad. And that tells you, I mean, if that was a country, we're talking about times 5 of some European countries. Luxembourg, for instance, has about 600,000 people, 600,000. So you can imagine what, I mean, that's just a local government in Lagos State, and that's a country. Montenegro, Malta, all of this combined together cannot even amount to the numbers of Nigerians that we have abroad. Next slide. So diaspora figures in remittance. In 2018, I'm just trying to lay a foundation before I begin to give my own suggestions. Remittance in Nigeria, in Sub-Saharan Africa in 2018 was about Nigerians' remittance within Africa was 1/3 of what came into the entire continent, Sub-Saharan Africa. So, and that estimated to about 23.6 billion. That was just in 2018. And as a matter of fact, this particular remittance, some of you already know the statistics, when you convert it into FDI, it's 11 times of what we call foreign direct investment. So that means all the funds that came from corporate organizations, institutions, our remittance in diaspora is 11 times of this. And also, the same year in 2018, that remittance also translates to be 83% of the federal government's budget. And if you go further, between 2017 and 2018, we had an increase in remittance. As a matter of fact, the official development assistance that came into the country, WHO, all of the help that we got from institutions, when you look at the remittance from diaspora, when you multiply those international grants and donations from these organizations, 7 times 4 times that is what was Nigeria's remittance in 2017, 2018. So let you know that the diaspora is an untapped asset. I'm going somewhere, please just bear with me. Next slide. If you do a general overview and you look at these 4 countries, China starting. China has become a manufacturing hub. His Excellency did a very terrific job talking about different sites, which I will not go into. China today has become the manufacturing hub for the world. India has become the educational hub for the world. Israel, startup nation for the world. Northern Ireland actually they were almost breaking apart. I was talking about ethnicity and all of that. Their peace was restored, and their case was an exemplary one. Now, from the manufacturing hub that China has become to Indians' own prowess in education to Israel's startup, there is a common denominator among these 4 countries. The common denominator they all have in common that's changed their fortune is their diaspora. It was their diaspora's prowess and contribution in making these countries. Chinese was China averagely as it was before. The Chinese, even Jack Ma, some of you know Jack Ma's story. Jack Ma was based in the US. got his idea, went back to the US, set up, he was a diasporan guy. And I can go on and on. All of this fortune changed because the diaspora was involved in this development. And so when we talk about migration and diaspora, migration has become the loose word. So we fear it, or let me say government stakeholders fear migration. Our people are leaving, and it's sad. Why are they not staying back? So it has become that the context is things are leaving. It has to do with dispersal. We are losing value. But if well captured, migration can be turned into diaspora, and rather than losing, as a matter of fact, you're actually getting something in return. So while migration speaks of dispersal, everybody who goes from their country of origin, they still carry their country at heart. And I'll go to more practical examples of my own experience living in Europe. So once you mainstream diaspora into the conversation, it doesn't matter whether they're in Sudan, Kenya, it doesn't matter whether they're in Yugoslavia, the diaspora prowess is enough to turn all of those outbound folks into real convertible assets for the country. Next slide, please. And so I'll just try to cap my thoughts for the incoming administration. I know there've been a lot about, most of the presidential candidates, as a matter of fact, went abroad, talking to diaspora members, supporters, but it has to go beyond the election period. It has to go beyond trying to galvanize resources. There has to be more. We don't want to see them just when they're coming to advocate for the next or console and tell us to vote for the next. So what are the thoughts I have when it comes to the incoming administration and how they can mainstream diaspora and engagement and also have robust partnerships? The first one is on mapping. My first advice is that government stakeholders or the incoming administration begin to invest in diaspora mapping. You can't even engage what you don't understand. The first question is, where are the Nigerians abroad? It's easy to say, they're in the US, they're in Canada, but beyond and deeper than the country where they're in, after you understand where they are, the question is, who are they really? So if you have Nigerians, for instance, in France, where I'm based, you can name them maybe about 80,000 Nigerians, but that's not sufficient. So the mapping goes deeper to say, what exactly do they do? What do they do? And when you say they're in France, are they in Paris? For instance, in our network, Friends of Nigeria, which is an organization I co-founded about 6-7 years ago, I can tell you for free that there are this number of engineers, Nigerian origin, based in Budapest, and this is exactly what they are doing. I can tell you this is the number of Nigerians who are focused on artificial intelligence, and they are into this. I can tell you the number of doctors, and that data, and at the level of what we do within Europe, we've been able to get a robust data, be able to engage them, and this didn't come for free. It took a lot because just like some of us live, there are people who leave Nigeria and they take their passports, never returning. So for you to even get those people to be able to trust the organization and be able to work with us, it took some level of value offering. And the government needs to understand that the more we know them, the more we understand what they want and what they do, the easier it is to engage them. So it's not enough to say there are 20 million Nigerians. Out of the 20 million, how many of them are asylum seekers? Because if you are trying to do diaspora bond or diaspora fund, and you're getting people who are still illegal in the country, you're talking to the wrong audience.